Okay, 11 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Barnett. For those of you that don't know me, I'm SVP of Sales for Pegasus Technology Solutions. I want to welcome everybody for coming on our Lunch and Learn with our great partner, Clumio, today. We've got Ricky Cochran and Charles Goforth with Clumio on. You'll hear from both of them here in a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Pegasus. So Pegasus, we're a technology solutions provider headquartered right here in Frisco, Texas. And basically, we solve business challenges through technology. One of the biggest challenges companies face today, when you look at cloud growth across multiple public and private providers, is how do I effectively back up everything, all my workloads, no matter where they are? Well, that's really what Clumio was built to do, to help companies do that. Pegasus was a very early partner with Clumio, thanks to our good friend Ricky and his persistence in working with us and getting us on board. And we've watched Clumio grow very, very quickly. And I think the reason for that growth is what we've talked about. Clumio provides a very cost-effective way to back up and secure your workloads, no matter where they are. So they've had a lot of success. People see that value. And that's what Ricky and Charles are here to talk about and go through and demo for you to show you that value that Clumio brings from that perspective. So Ricky Cochran's director for this region for Clumio, and he's here with us today, and he's going to talk about the Clumio story. So welcome, Ricky. Ricky, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. There we go. Thank you.
Good start. It's a good start for a Zoom call.
I'm literally sitting here waiting on the AWS delivery and the dogs to bark, of course. Yeah, exactly. So, Steve, thank you very much for the introduction and for all the partnership. And thank you to everyone who's joined and attended this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I am actually, just to make sure I don't have any bandwidth contention challenges, I'm going to turn my video off during the duration of my presentation. Want to also let everyone out there know that I believe the moderator has everyone on mute to try and avoid any kind of contention audio issues. If you have a question during the presentation, please go to the chat section. If you hover over the controls on the Ring control system, there's an area for chat, and please type your question in there. And we're going to block off 5 or 10 minutes at the end to address all the questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'm going to turn my video off, and then I'm going to start walking through a few slides, and I'm going to get through these slides as rapidly as possible, and then I'm going to actually stop my sharing and turn it over to my engineering partner Charles to do a quick demo. And so the title of today's presentation is end-to-end data protection and what we're all learning to be the new normal, and what Clumio sees evolving. So just a quick overview of Clumio. We're actually still a pretty young company, founded in 2017. If you can see my mouse hovering over, these are our 3 founders, and our CEO and founder here, Pujan Kumar. Some of you may have worked with things he's built in the past. Pujan actually was the original founder of Oracle Exadata, just to give you an idea of the roots of and depth of his technology background. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of venture capitalist funding. We're a silicon-based startup. We've had 3 rounds of funding totaling $186 million. And we actually, as soon as we launched our product in August of last year, we immediately were rewarded Best of Show at VMworld. Our investors tend to be a who's who in Silicon Valley. If you don't follow Silicon Valley and the venture capital investments, batting percentage. They don't invest in a ton of portfolio, but what they invest in tends to be very successful. So what our founders identified is around 2017, like I said, they took a look at the market and they realized that the market is moving rapidly towards cloud. I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear that that's on this call. New companies today are not even building data centers or buying equipment to go in data centers. They're generally building directly into the cloud. And so if you look, data centers have evolved from on-prem data center to colos into the three big cloud players, if you will, all as a service. Compute has gone on its journey as well, from bare metal to virtualization, and now to all the compute services available. You'll see a trend here: databases, Oracle, to the big Oracle appliances, and now these are all being consumed as services. And so our founders frankly identified that, hey, there's a spot in the market not being addressed for backup. People are not leveraging the cloud to use for data protection and potential security and analytics. So this is where Clumio fits in. Backup, was modernized to a degree by Rubrik and Cohesity not too long ago. Again, those are still built for on-prem environments. Clumio is the new era of backup built natively in the cloud for the cloud. So, if you go through, I'd be willing to bet almost everybody paying attention on here, your organization has gone through some of this, where you have your traditional data center, and somehow probably 5 to 10 years ago, depending on your maturity, someone said, hey, we need to start putting things into the cloud. Well, the first and easiest way to consume cloud tends to be around SaaS. You notice that everything up here in the SaaS window is built to be consumed as a service, the pay-as-you-go, use only what you need model. Now, that doesn't work for everything. So what we saw in the market is some lifting and shifting. That means, taking applications that were built for the on-prem data center and just kind of porting them out to the cloud. So this led to a lot of app refactorization. The marketplace found out that applications need to be optimized for the cloud to make them work effectively. Unfortunately, some people found out without this cloud optimization, the cloud can be very expensive. So we saw actually some repatriation of applications back to the data center. Well, now we get into the new. So what we're finding is new organizations and new development is immediately going to cloud native resources. We're seeing a plateau, if not a decrease, of on-prem workloads. Everything new, we constantly hear from customers, we're on a cloud first trajectory, or we've been told to do SaaS first if we can. And so this has led to a lot of cloud optimized workloads, and we believe this is the future. So as data sources begin to explode, you start to see that you have to deal with your on-prem workloads that are still there, but now you've got to deal with SaaS that you're using, when any SaaS platforms that you're using, how do we protect those workloads, and any cloud native workloads. So some of the challenges that are naturally created include complexity of all these moving parts. Suddenly you've got a lot of cats in the pasture that need herding with data all over the place. And how do you know that you're not becoming vulnerable? How do I know that this new SaaS application we're using isn't suspect of vulnerabilities, or our new cloud-based application is not vulnerable? Hidden cost is another challenge that we see. A lot of folks claim to be a SaaS model, but then really are what's called a bring your own cloud, meaning they put a lot of the burden of the cloud cost and management back on the customer. We call those bring your own cloud providers. And of course, security. Security has been there since day one, or the need for security, but given what's going on around us, we've seen a heightened need for security. So we talked about the new normal, and hopefully everyone is doing as well as can be, given what we've been through the last quarter or so. Things that we hear in the market that are the new normal as it pertains to IT include infrastructure as code, the need for agility and simplicity. In fact, we're hearing more and more simplicity is becoming key, as unfortunately resources and headcount are being impacted. Heightened security emphasis. As we know, everyone with the unexpected and rapid move to work from home created new vulnerabilities that had to be addressed. And so we're seeing a heightened security emphasis in the market. Reduced management resources are a challenge that we're seeing in the market. time to use and time for value realization. So when a company invests their money these days, we're often tasked with, okay, how quickly can I make use of this thing that I just spent? Do I have to ship something to the data center that's going to sit there 6 weeks? Or can I deploy this rapidly and get use from my money on day one? Of course, lots of inspection around cash outlay and CapEx scrutinization today. More than ever, the uncertainty of things has caused everyone to hold on to dollars a little more. And so you need to understand what your options are. And, is an OpEx solution in a better situation right now? Remote optimization for the workforce has become a heightened normal. Services consumption. If you revert to the previous slide, we're seeing more and more services that are just let me consume this by the drink instead of having to pay up front for everything. And then a remote workspace definition. Very interested to see what the future looks like and what the workspace and work office ratio looks like in the future. So introduce Clumio. So Clumio, if you're not familiar or haven't done any research on us, we are a 100% cloud-based backup SaaS model. So what that means is, we have no on-prem hardware. If you invest and become a Clumio customer, we're not going to ship any hardware to your facility. We are 100% native to the cloud, and there will be no hardware required to use our solution. So the benefits of Clumio are that we have the ability to protect data in the private cloud. This would be, for instance, your on-prem data center. We do protect the on-prem VMware workloads out in the market, but we also have the ability to protect native public cloud workloads. So we'll get into, right now we protect native AWS, EBS, and soon to be RDS workloads. And we're also moving into the SaaS world. So a lot of folks are not aware that when you leverage SaaS solutions such as Microsoft Office 365 mailboxes, a lot of the responsibility for data protection falls on the consumer. So with Clumio, we are, like we said, we are a cloud. Behind the covers, it's the public cloud space. But what some of the benefits of Clumio include is the ability to scale on demand. Because we don't have any hardware, as your needs grow or shrink, we scale in accordance with that. Ease of management, we're 100% SaaS-based solution. So Clumio customers are never required to patch or do code upgrades for our solution. All of that is managed by the Clumio team. We offer predictable cost modeling, and this is one thing that Clumio customers really love. So with Clumio, I'll give you a good example. In the on-prem world, we support backing up VMware. So we take your on-prem VMware and we take a copy and back it up to what's called the Clumio cloud. With that, our pricing model is actually per VM per year. And the interesting thing about this is that's the only fee Clumio customers ever see. In other words, there's no additional cost that you see for cloud storage or egress. Clumio customers never see an egress fee. So if they take a backup, store it in the Clumio cloud, if they have to do a restore back on-prem, there is no bill coming from a cloud provider. That cost is all inclusive in the per VM per year model. Additionally, we offer heightened data protection in that when data is moved to the Clumio cloud, we immediately replicate to 2 additional sites. So we have 3 copies in disparate regions of your data. We have always on end-to-end security. Data is always encrypted. And here's a very big one for today's world. Unfortunately, with what's going on, we see heightened ransomware activity. Clumio provides what's called air gap. And focus in on that word or that phrase, air gap. Sadly, everybody's all too familiar with it. In the physical world, we refer to it as social distancing, but in the digital world, air gap, which means basically we create a gap between your production copy of your data and your backup data that can't be detected. This further illustrates what I'm referring to. So in your on-prem data center, if you were to allow Clumio to back up your VMware environment, everything that we have, just an OVA that you download onto your vCenter environment, is stateless. And so nothing can be detected here of Clumio. We send the copy. All indexing and cataloging is done in the cloud. And so it creates an air gap copy, immutable and non-detectable by any bad actors. Same goes for cloud-based workloads. We don't support all of these workloads today, but we support about half of them with an eye towards the rest of them. What we create is another air gap, so we get a copy of your data out of your own accounts to help from protection for ransomware. Here's a good example of some of the benefits of moving to Clumio. Again, focusing in for this specific use case would be your on-prem VMware. Recall, Clumio has no hardware. And so we leverage the cloud consumption model. We allow customers to consume resources on demand. We have no pre-provisioning of resources. We reduce exposure to hardware supply chain challenges, which we see coming in the near future. We innovate at the speed of SaaS, and we allow customers to, frankly, deploy from anywhere. So instead of having to ship these pieces of hardware to your data center and add to them every so often as your capacity either planned or unplanned grows, you can see that Clumio, represented by the blue line, follows hand in hand with the customer demand. So we eliminate this gap where you don't have to overspend day one. Rather, you spend what you need day one and add to it or take away as needed. Keep a little bit more cash in your pocket is the goal here. So here's a good example of before Clumio, your traditional backup looks something like this. In your data center, you would have your VMware farm. You have some sort of a backup server that you have agents on and media servers. And you have some sort of a backup repository, some sort of a data storage that you can save your backups to. Most companies then replicate this to a secondary site. So a lot of times you have an identical redundant set of hardware at a second site, maybe even a third location. With Clumio, this changes. So with Clumio, we take out the need for that secondary site hardware. We allow you to take your backups directly to the cloud. And again, remembering that we also immediately replicate to 2 other sites. So we have 3 copies on the first copy of your backup. So Clumio future-proofs our cloud backup strategy, protecting our data. The key is wherever it is with a single cloud-based service and a predictable cost model. One of our early customers, MarkLogic. So our goal is to make it where as data explodes into the cloud, whether it be SaaS-based consumption or infrastructure or cloud-native applications, we want you to be able to use Clumio to protect those new and emerging data sets. So today, Clumio backs up VMware on-prem, VMware Cloud on AWS, native AWS EBS volumes, and Microsoft Office 365 mailboxes. Those are the platforms that we can support today. All right, that's about as rapid as I could do those slides. I'm sure that's probably got some questions drummed up, which we'd love to answer to you. One of the key selling points to Clumio is our simplicity. And so the Clumio service takes under a half hour to deploy. Again, recall 100% SaaS-based, no on-prem hardware to procure, build, deliver, and deploy. So I'm actually now going to stop the slide sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Charles Goforth, and he's going to walk us through a demo of the Clumio interface. Charles, take it away.
So the magic of tech, I should have unmuted myself and shared my screen. Be sure if there are any questions, go through the chat. There's probably a Q&A. We'll look at both of those. What I'm sharing right here is the homepage for the Clumio interface. Before I get into that, a couple of talking points that Ricky had reviewed. I wanted to ensure that everyone was clear. And again, we're well aware of the difficult times that our world and our country is going through. We really aren't aware about how long this will continue, but we do recognize that the the race for a remote workforce that we saw at the beginning of COVID-19, as you know, that we saw a large cash spend to enable that, but largely spend has shut down. We believe that the challenges of COVID-19 have highlighted a trend that was already underway, maybe in a 2-year or a 3-year cycle, but now it's accelerating, where businesses, they must look to allocate limited spend in a much more strategic manner. So large CapEx outlays that we've traditionally seen as technology, they're going to have the economic uncertainty that we're faced with now. We have to reconsider, should we spend large amount of CapEx over the next 3 to 5 years, or depreciating over the next 3 to 5 years, because recurring revenue is something that's questioned. There's a lot of businesses that are holding on to a thread. If you have large debt, you have a high chance of extinction. So business cannot fall prey to making large CapEx purchases at this time. So we're going to see a CapEx shift to OpEx. Clumio, recognizing this, we enable that OpEx where you aren't going to have to prepay for that 3 to 5 years of what you would anticipate for business. So we enable this trend where SaaS plays a role of adapting to challenges about ROI and time to consume, where you get immediate action. Actually, SaaS at the end of the day is the easy button. And so let me show you how the easy button will work when it comes to data protection. So here, again, this is the home screen, and this gives a visibility of just what data sources I have in my lab today to protect. This is a data protection solution, and so the part of this is to identify what data sources you have in your business that you would like to have protected, determining on the SLAs that your organization requires. So fundamentally, we're very simple and intuitive, and we can step through basically a left to right navigation. Is that, hey, if I want to go ahead and create a policy for some type of workload, and we could call this policy typically like a demo test, which could be a little bit redundant there, but demo test. We just identify what data sources is it important for us to protect with this policy. We do believe that businesses are adopting a SaaS where it makes sense, because you can take advantage of intelligent design. You can get the optimizations that are already delivered for you, and therefore the business can retool and refocus their core competency elsewhere, where SaaS itself is like just the solutions that help the business itself function, but really aren't the competitive advantage of the business. So with us, we see that more public cloud, more SaaS, and more your virtual environments are where your growth will occur. So in the demo here, I'll show, I think the majority of everyone has a familiar with VMware. I'll create a policy around VMware. I could have selected additional data sources under the same policy, but just for this demo, I want to show the intuitiveness. Extremely flexible on what the outcome you determine. So if you require backups to have an hourly occurrence because the data is critical for you there, you can select this as an hourly. This is basically like a radio button. You can choose to increase the days of the retention for those hourly backups. It's very easy to do that. We often run into compliance world, medical, financial, anything that's regulated will require us to have a longer term retention. And so this is something that we enable. What's unique about Clumio than other data protection is that there is no cost for the retention for these VMware backups. So what I mean by that is if you require a backup every hour and you're retaining this for 7 years, as I'm showing you right here in the screen, your cost doesn't elevate. It's flat. And that's I think that's going to be something that's high demand, is predictable cost, not an escalating cost just because your business grows. As a matter of fact, if your business shrinks where you have a reduced number of VMs, your Clumio falls in line. You're only paying for what you consume, and that we believe that in the new normal, that agility is going to be strategic and imperative for success in the future. So kind of talked quite a bit about the policy creation. We do also have a way for you to select a separate on-demand backup. So if you wanted to have a backup that occurs right before a maintenance window, so it's out of the normal compliance retention realm, but it is important for the protection of, in case you needed to roll back to a last known good, go ahead and just define a retention of that backup, and it's very flexible in how you can make that retention months, years, days. Typically, we're pretty good knowing that if we've rolled out an update and we needed to roll back, we're going to know that we need to do that probably fairly quickly. So I'll create that policy, and again, for the purpose of the demo, I'll share inside of VMware. So with Clumio, all of the components that constitute the data protection platform are hosted in the cloud. So that means that there is no scaling that the customer has to accommodate for. If you bring on one server, you bring on one vCenter, an entire data center, multiple vCenters, the footprint in the customer environment is an OVA. It's a cloud connector that just waits for instruction set from the Clumio cloud. And so I point that out because in the demo that I have here, I have two separate vCenters. Both of them are connected by the OVA, but the OVA itself is largely just sitting here waiting for instruction. Is there a VM that has a policy associated with it, and does it need to initiate a backup? So we've created a policy. I can see that there was 27 VMs that were already under policy, but there's some set of 10 sets of VMs that are not in a policy. So I can just go ahead and apply that policy that we just created, the demo test. We're going to back it up every hour. It's very simple. We've defined it. We can do it at a applied policy at the VM level, which is much more granular. We could have the policy at even the entire cluster level. So it would be the default policy, and then you could just add additional policies or a separate policy for more granularity. We can also apply them to folders. And really what's evolving to are tags. Tags are the way that you balance what is what, especially when you are moving more toward a cloud-centric workload. Oftentimes the resources in cloud are very obscure characters, and so tags help just keep our human brain acknowledging what's what. So again, applying the policy is very simple. We can go into our task manager and we can just see what is happening. So I've applied a policy. You can see here the prod VM01 had a policy associated with it, and so we've done that. This is a demo, so live demos, you can be almost guaranteed that somebody on my back-end engineering team, they actually access this lab themselves, so they could be making some changes, testing code, because we, as a SaaS, we roll out our code every week or every other week, and we test it in my demo lab here before we do the release, which is on Fridays. So Wednesday, we're kind of mid-cycle where we're probably seeing a lot of new things tested out in the environment. So what's unique with us is, again, you have these cloud connectors. They're very lightweight. The only requirement to get them to work in your environment, you need to give it an IP address via DHCP or static IP, and it will need to communicate with the Clumio cloud via outbound port 443. Those are our requirements. So to log into Clumio and to do a restoration, you don't actually need a healthy vCenter. I can do file level restorations just through the Clumio interface. You could have an entire site down and still have access to your data. You could deploy a cloud connector in another site and then have access to doing redirected restorations. Restorations are very intuitive. All the features are there for you. You can, if you know the name of a file, by all means, type the name of the file. I'm assuming this is a Windows server, so I'm just going to type out WIN, and it will pull in a list of any files that match that. But not only that, let's say you don't know the name of the file that you want to restore. You can click on a day that the backup occurred, the time, and then just browse the file system that existed and kind of look for what it is. And sometimes, as backup admins, we have to do a little investigation to figure out, well, what is the file that we need? But if the entire VM itself is in a state of corruption, you can also do a restoration of that VM. Restorations can occur inside of the vCenter that the VM lived, or they can also occur into a separate vCenter by clicking on the advanced mode. Think of use cases for this. Potentially you have a complete down of a site and you need to restore into another vCenter. Just select the other vCenter that exists. As long as there's a cloud connector running, you can do restorations, you can do backups. What's another advantage that we have in our technology is that we use the change block tracking, not only for the backups, but for the restoration. So where other backup tools are heavily reliant upon the bandwidth that you provide from your site to the cloud, Clumio changes the game. Our founders were actually VMware engineers that wrote the ESXi kernel. And so they're intimately aware of how change block tracking works inside of VMware. So in the example where you have a VM in a data center and it's corrupt, something happened, it won't even power on, and you need to restore it. Well, what we will do is we will look at the change block tracks that occur, or change blocks that exist inside of the data store, and we will rehydrate that VM from the data store using the VAAI APIs inside of VMware, and only move what's missing from those blocks on-prem from the cloud. So you could have a 5 terabyte VM restoration, and really we're only going to need maybe 50 gig that we're pulling from the cloud. So you can see a 5 terabyte restoration occurring in a matter of like 5 to 10 minutes. These are things that we feel help close the gap when it comes to uncertainty inside of an environment. Can you use a true SaaS application for something that touches inside the on-prem? And so the answer is absolutely. When you do it and you design it intelligently, it's a very easy success rate. I normally have more interaction so people can ask questions, but I'm gonna move through. I wanted to show the browsing capability, the restoration capability of the VMware. We do build into our tool the ability to ensure that Clumio does not impact your production environment. You know, I was an IT director for a number of years before joining on the OEM side, and you know, we always wanted to make sure that we could do backups, but not for the sake of business. So why I point that out is that, you know, we don't require you to invest in a high-speed network connection. We understand that your network connection you have today to the public internet serve a lot of business functions. You're receiving messaging and things of that nature, voice over IP. So we give you the ability that during business hours, if you want to limit the transfer rate, just in case some backup jobs are initiated during business hours, by all means, go ahead and define a limitation that you would want to ensure that Clumio does not exceed the utilization of that environment, and just create, you know, we can say we're going to use 50 meg. But again, this is just to ensure that we aren't going to introduce problems in your environment. We're looking to solve it. Again, SaaS at the end of the day is the easy button. The reason why enterprise moved toward a SaaS first model is that you want to get an optimized platform. And SaaS provides you the advantage by eliminating the complexity. You readdress your own intellectual mind share into places in your business that are important, and you get a results-based service that's optimized already for you. And it stays current. Again, I mentioned that Clumio, we update our code every week, and with features. Sometimes they're customer-facing, meaning that we had recently introduced the ability to bring your own encryption to enhance the envelope level of encryption that we provide today, where we rotate keys every 30 days. All the data is encrypted end to end, which is the #1 way to help protect your data. So data will never leave your site in an unencrypted, it's always encrypted. And so we may ensure that you have that capability of ensuring that when you place your data in Clumio, it is secured. So I showed that. We can click real quickly. I wanted just to be sure that I'm sharing everybody. We did complete that vCEO VM restoration in 2 minutes. We did complete the backup that we applied a policy in 2 minutes. Those are just coincidental. We don't just scale on 2-minute intervals. We are indexing now in the Clumio cloud. So this is just to highlight what does that mean for you, is that your restoration is not dependent on the fact that the demo lab in this case is up and running. Like you can have you have the ability to access your data and do restores, data mobility, leveraging the Clumio cloud. Again, backup as often as you want. Restore, you could write a script to restore every minute. Your cost is flat with Clumio, so there is no hidden cost in egress. And the agility that the economic uncertainty, we have to be creative about where we consume our technology services. And so we see what was occurring, the adoption of cloud, the adoption of SaaS, we believe that to accelerate. And your governance doesn't go away just because you have now decentralized your deployment of technology services. You still will require to provide protection on that. And so Clumio will do this. You look at your AWS environment, I can share that we will apply policy across your multiple accounts, multiple regions from a centralized viewpoint. EBS volumes, the same policy that I created for the VMware, I could assign that to an AWS solution. RDS, which is where Ricky had alluded to, we provide RDS level data protection too. This is beyond a snapshot manager. Anyone that's dipping their toes into the cloud right now, and they probably are just because you need some agility beyond what the four-wall data center has today, the default data protection is snapshots. And the more snapshots you have, the more expensive the cost of ownership is. And everybody who's done backups recognizes that snapshots traditionally are not a preferred method of recovery. Because there's a lot of vulnerability that exists. You have to have a healthy account. If in the case of a bad actor or bad script, the snapshots can be easily compromised. Clumio solves that in the AWS world, in the public cloud world, because we use VPC endpoints. We create an immutable copy of your data outside of your account. This is extremely powerful because no longer are you paying for the retention chain of snapshots. You get a true copy of your data that is being hosted for you, and then you can have data mobility without any egress. So what that means is that if you were copying your data from one account to the other, you were occur an egress. With Clumio, you can do multiple resources to different regions and have no cost associated with that. So again, it controls your cost. It gives you a better security footprint. And let me just share with you what we're doing in RDS that's extremely powerful for customers, that we can do, inside of RDS, you'd have like a 35-day backup. And that's really all that you get with the snapshot. What we would allow is to do a record retrieval of those backups where I have a backup, I'm decoupled from the database engine. So I could do a query of the data and provide a record retrieval without needing to do a restoration of the entire database. And that's something different in that the traditional database, if I have a backup, I have to restore that database to some disk and then import it into a database and have a DBA read the query. Well, here I can just type a query, select star from, and just do a preview. If I'm good at my SQL query, it will actually show the record retrieval. This is the reason I didn't have to spin up a database to do this. This will save your DBAs a tremendous amount of time. This decouples the requirement of having a database engine running. The analogy is that, how many of us are still managing a SQL 2003 server? Probably not a whole lot, but if you need to recover a record from an old backup, you're going to have to find that database engine somewhere or do some import and conversion. This will save you time. So in 5 years, if you have to do a recovery from an RDS, and AWS themselves have deprecated that database engine, it's fine because we have the data available for you and we're able to do these record retrievals without having to substantiate the entire database again. We believe that's extremely powerful. So I've shown 2 data sources. I know I'm talking a lot. I'll give us the final data source that I'd like to share is the Office 365, Microsoft 365. Most organizations have already moved to SaaS for mail. There's very, very few folks that are are managing on-prem exchange. If you are, you most likely have a model of moving to mail in the cloud. And so the challenge there is that, well, it provides you mailboxes without any overhead of the Exchange admin. But now if you have to do a recovery, you have to create a support ticket with Microsoft and wait for them to retrieve that data. That could take several days. And now you're on their timeline for you to have a recovery. And that often doesn't meet your business needs. So applying a data protection policy that's compliant with all of your data sources, VMware, AWS, and having the ability to report on it, we believe is extremely important. So in the case of Microsoft 365, I can have this gold policy. I'm protecting, maybe it's every day, every hour, and therefore I can go in and look at my mailbox, see when the last backup that occurred, and I can browse emails. So I can say, okay, I need to recover an email that was deleted, or perhaps there was a legal hold and I need to do a redirected restoration to another mailbox. I can do those functions very simple, very intuitive with Clumio. I don't have to use a third tool for my VM and my AWS and now my mail. And so I can do this restoration of this individual mail. I can restore multiple mail items. I can restore them to a different mail domain, a different mailbox name. I can create a folder that says, this is a restore, and therefore I know exactly where it's going. So it helps out that I'm going to be doing a mail level restoration. I can also do a restore of my entire mailbox. So again, the challenge here that we're solving is that whenever data is lost, there's probably everyone's hit the delete or didn't know that we deleted it. There's a finite retention that we get inherited in Microsoft without going into like an E3 or an E5. Instead of spending that money, look for cool tools that give you complete management of your data without any compromise. And that's what we enable when it comes to the mail on Microsoft 365, soon to include OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and Groups. So that's the really quick, I hope, quick demo that shows the power that we have. We've decoupled the data protection from the on-prem. We're going to put in an extinction to tech refresh. There's no capacity for you to manage. This is what we believe is important in the going forward, is an architecture that is designed for the needs. So you remove the need to architect for peak, and you just have a solution that the services are efficient for what you need. You pay for only what you're using and nothing more. So we no longer have to have these large 3 to 5 year depreciation capex, because at the end of the day, what we're looking at today is, am I going to depreciate a $200,000 data protection appliance that can only do a very finite amount of functions, or that I had to prepay for, or do I have payroll? And we believe that if you reduce your cost of your data protection, you get to keep more people happily employed, because as we will get a recovery. We don't know when, but we feel like more efficient usage of resources is much more of a strategy going forward. I'm going to pause my sharing because I think we have some chat and QA, and so we'll get started over there. So I'm going to look at the chat. Does it back up VIP user workstations? So the question there, thank you for that, Tony. This is not an end user device backup application. We are designed for the enterprise workload of the applications that are in the data center, and not the end user devices. So phone, laptop, tablets are not within scope of Clumio. Adam, stocking, we use Commvault for our backup solution, and with that, Commvault agents in our vCenter VMs. So what does Clumio use to get the backups? So Adam, what we do is our OVA is what we call the cloud connector. The cloud connector uses API calls native inside of VMware that allows us to write a backup without an agent. The idea behind Clumio is that the architecture of a traditional backup solution is very complex, And there's individual pieces that you have to manage. These agents are actually part of that. Plugins inside of vCenter are things that you have to update. With Clumio, we want it to be a one-step. You deploy our OVA and you're done. So we update everything end to end. It's a hands-free once your OVA is running, which is a 1 gig download. The footprint of the OVA in your VMware environment is 4 virtual CPUs, 8 gig of RAM. So that is all the footprint of that OVA. We call it the cloud connector. That's all you would need. So no longer would you need to manage agents in your environment. No longer would you have to update those and ensure interoperability is compliant across that. So we give you the simplicity because we do believe that your environment deserves that. You would eliminate the complexity there, and your mind share for your business goes to other places that actually help revenue-facing applications or things of that nature. Backups traditionally don't make money for businesses, and we recognize that. Frank, can we restore a AWS machine to on-prem VMware? So Frank, that is something that we are working on. Today, that is not part of what we do. We do allow data recovery to any vCenter in the globe, on the globe, as long as you have a cloud connector. The cloud connectors, they are their own little devices that you run. Again, 4 virtual CPU, 8 gig of RAM. You can put them in any vCenter. The rehydration from a VMDK to an AMI is part of our roadmap. We will have more discussions on that probably in 2021 about how we're enabling orchestrated DR. Today, we're going to market, though, as a way of just providing a very simple backup tool that a lot of folks that can, and by the way, everything can be done via API scripting. So a lot of folks could do a true DR with the API calls, but we're gonna, there's more work for us to be able to provide that as a tool for you with orchestration. It's not there yet today. The only on-prem data source that we protect today is VMware. The question Tony has asked here is that do we back up Hyper-V? The answer is no. And Tony, to be blunt, I don't see that in our roadmap very soon. Azure is a data source that we look to bring on board, and the Azure VM, we've seen the models that Microsoft is doing where it's become much more license friendly to go to an Azure VM versus an on-prem Hyper-V, and therefore, for us to architect a backend Hyper-V doesn't seem like there's a large market share there. I'm going to switch over to the Q&A. I see that we had the same questions listed there. All right. Any other questions, please, by all means. I don't know if we are able to open up phone lines or if we're just using the chat
Yeah,
session.
we can't, Charles. It's only
Okay.
going to be in here. So it looks like you've gone through them all. And
Okay.
if we do have any additional questions, I think we can get those to you, Charles. So or answer them for Clumio. So
Great.
Hey, Charles and Steve, I did want to chime in back to the question about the ability to restore, I lost the question now, the AWS AMI. So I can't find the exact question, but something that is pretty unique that is worth exploring is we have a great partnership with VMware. And if you're not familiar with VMware Cloud on AWS, because of what Charles described, Clumio can restore to any vCenter, no matter where it resides. And so we do have a pretty unique DR style option in a partnership with VMware Cloud on AWS that may be worth exploring on an offline dialogue.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit more because that could be very foreign to hear. But for the customers out there, check out VMC On Demand. It's not widely known yet, but it's growing because initially VMC was very expensive. Again, the whole thing, I've got to sign up for 12 months and it's very expensive for these 12 months. But VMC On Demand, you could start with $3,000 and it's good for 3 years. Use it in 3 years, and you are guaranteed a footprint for like maybe 5 days. We work with natively inside of the VMC because again, all the components of the data protection solution are in the cloud. VMC is in the cloud. So therefore, we get to use VPC endpoints to move that data very rapidly. We aren't having to transfer over like internet gateways, the traditional fails that occur that cost money to customers. So a VMC on demand is a solution that you could get in about 90 minutes, and the run rate for that is $27 an hour. So if you consider what you're paying for Site 2, maybe it's time to decide that is that colo something that you want to invest in, or could you look for more of a software defined, that infrastructure as code that that Ricky alluded to, right? We have to start thinking about how do we get flexibility without having to buy boxes, and this is one of those solutions. Tony asked a question about how we're priced. Ricky, you want to talk about that one?
Sure. So I'll go by workload, and we can, again, of course, we welcome any follow-up one-on-one dialogues with anyone if you need more detail. But if you're talking about VMware for on-prem VMware or VMware cloud on AWS, the pricing model is per VM per year. And again, the thing to keep in the back of your mind, that's all inclusive of all cloud storage and any egress that may be incurred. So it is per VM per year. On our Office 365 mailboxes, the pricing is per mailbox. So it's not, again, we try and, for those workloads, eliminate the capacity dialogue. For native EBS volumes, that is a per terabyte cost, per terabyte per year. And then RDS, which we're launching in the very near future, will be priced the same.
Yeah. So, you know, with Clumio, the challenges that we see right now, if you're going to spend money, you need to be able to take advantage of it immediately. You can't have a 6-week project plan to deploy something. Clumio will onboard in 15 minutes or less. So your return on investment is almost immediate there. You remove from your projects the need to architect for peak. There is no more inefficiencies. And we believe that that's where customers and businesses need to go to be competitive and just honestly to stay alive, is to only pay for what they use. Don't have a bunch of excess. You know, if you think about it in the retail world, those that have shelves full of inventory, that inventory costs them money. And the same analogy is doing in the IT world, is that if you have excess compute, excess storage that you're not using, it's just costing you money. And we eliminate that waste from your environment, especially when it comes to the backup. And the fact that all of the components that are in the cloud, we're able to burst out services very quickly. We don't have to wait for Intel to release its next chipset in order for us to build out an appliance for you. So when it comes for data analytics, it's really just a microservice that we'll run into in the cloud, and then give you that service and that capability. So therefore, it's not only is it just a copy of your data, but then we can provide you more service. As I showed with a SQL query, that's something that, you know, we didn't have to wait for, did I have enough compute in the box to run those sort of things? And so we feel like that's going to give you way more flexibility in how you're leveraging and consuming backup, but also seeing the additional services that will come available to you without any lifting on your side. Any other questions or on the chat?
I think you got them all, Charles. Looks like it.
All right.
Well, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Ricky, for joining us today. Great stuff. Thank you for going through the demo, Charles. That was just seeing the ease of use of Clumio and how easy it is to work with. It's pretty awesome. Very compelling. And Ricky, thanks for going through the Clumio story. Appreciate your time.
You bet.
Thanks to all of our guests coming on today. Really appreciate your time. Pegasus and your sales executive will be in touch to talk about Clumio and gauge your interest to see if you'd like a deeper dive depending on your environment, your specific needs. So
yeah, and Steve, I'd like to chime in here just to make everybody aware. We welcome 30-day POCs. If someone's got a project or think they may have a use case here, the great thing about Clumio is you can deploy it from your home office. No one has to visit the data center. So if it's at all looks like a tool that somebody can use, we welcome and embrace a POC.
Absolutely. and we're here to help as well. So thanks, everyone. That concludes the Lunch and Learn today. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.